Hello, BookTube. This is Weekly Reads. My reading week has been quite the roller coaster. Um, it started with a mistake and ended on a very high note indeed. So, last week I mentioned having some trepidation about what I was planning on reading to start my reading week. And I ultimately went with The Peloponnesian War by Donald Kagan. This is a history of the 30-year war between Athens and its allies and Sparta and its allies. I first encountered the Peloponnesian War over 20 years ago in my first college class. A few years later, I decided to pick the book up when I was a member of the History Book Club, and shortly thereafter I set out to read it. And I remember skimming it, and I think I ultimately bailed on it. A few years ago, as I started getting more and more into history, I decided that I wanted to reacquire a number of history titles that I had in my collection when I was younger, when I was in Austin, when I was a college student. And so I picked up the Peloponnesian War. And I sat on my shelves for several years until I decided to. Initially, I wanted to read this for BookTube at War, assuming there is another round of BookTube at War this year. But since my reading plans for Historathon hasn't gone all that well, and the Peloponnesian War fits in with the first time period, I decided I'll go ahead and read it now. And it was a mistake. The book's okay, but it reads very much like a textbook. The book basically is broken down into nice little excerptable snippets. So I read the first 80 or so pages, and it's broken down sort of like this. So, what was the Peloponnesian League? What was Sparta and its allies? What was Athens and its Delian League? How was Athens considered an empire while Sparta wasn't? How did Sparta and its allies stumble into the war? How did Athens and its allies stumble into the war? What were they doing when war was first declared? What were their goals? So on and so forth. It's quite boring. And maybe if I were more interested in Greek history, maybe I would be interested enough to continue on. But as I was reading this book, I sort of, before I bailed on it, I realized two things. One, that I'm definitely starting to sense an ebbing in my interest in history. And two, that as much as I love Greek mythology, and believe me, I do, I'm not nearly as interested in classical Greek history. So, anyway. Although maybe if there's a really, really wonderfully written one, that might change. Although the Peloponnesian War is not that book. So, for the second part of Saturday, I decided to read some poetry, which actually wasn't much of a well, it wasn't a mistake. Although I didn't particularly care for either volume. Although one I liked a little bit more than the other. Excuse me. So I first read Taking to Water by Jennifer Conlon. So this is a collection that uses sort of the aquatic and amphibious environment, taking to water, as well as fish and frogs as metaphors for the trans and non-binary experience. And unfortunately, I didn't particularly care for the poems in this collection. Now, I might reread it at some point, and I might change my opinion. That sometimes does happen. But this particular reading, it did not work for me. I next read Pocket Universe by Nancy Reddy. I like this collection a bit better. It was the poems are more centered on motherhood and the experience of being a mother. And there were a few quite good poems, but I wasn't wowed by the collection. And I also had a bit of time to sort of revisit some poems from the Autumn House Anthology of Contemporary American Poetry. And I reread the poems from the Dickman twins that are included in this anthology, and I actually thought those poems on a reread actually quite improved, particularly Matthew Dickman's poem All American Poem. I thought was actually quite good. But yeah, so I really need to rethink how I'm approaching eventually another go at the Autumn House Anthology of Contemporary American Poetry. So for the rest of my reading week, I read manga. And for the most part, it was a blast. I had a blast with it. So I started my manga reading with the first 5 volumes of Record of Ragnarok by Azychika, Shinya Umemura, and Takumi Fukui. So Record of Ragnarok is, I guess you could say, it's a competition manga, or like a fighting competition manga. So in this setting, every 1,000 years, all of the gods from all of the pantheons come together in Congress, in council, to decide whether or not humanity deserves to exist for another 1,000 years. When the council meets this time, the decision is to eradicate humanity. There's just no defending keeping them around. The decision is almost unanimous, and the decision is about to be carried out when the Valkyrie Brunhilde objects, and she basically cajoles the gods into accepting the Ragnarok competition, which in this setting is a competition between select gods and human champions. The first team to 7 victories will basically decide whether humanity exists for another 1,000 years or is eradicated. So the fights that are sort of featured in the 5 volumes that I read are Thor for the gods against Lu Bu, who is a Chinese warrior from the Three Kingdoms period. So this is Thor, and that's Lu Bu. The second fight is between Zeus, who in this case is sort of the supreme king of the gods, and Adam. The third match is between Poseidon, who is considerably younger looking than his younger brother, and Sasaki Kojiro, who is a Japanese warrior from the Sengoku period. The third match largely continues in this volume as well. And the fourth match is between Heracles and Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper. So basically, on the face of it, the humans have absolutely no chance to fight against the gods. However, the Valkyrie have a means to even the battlefield, or the fighting arena, if you will. The Valkyrie can bond with their human champions and form a magical weapon that can even the field with the gods and their own divine weapons. So I was a bit anxious about the series when I first picked it up, because I'm a big fan of mythology, particularly Greek mythology, and I'm a bit sensitive when it comes to modern interpretations, retellings of mythology and Greek mythology in particular, because so often it can go quite wrong, or maybe not wrong, but I don't particularly care for the retelling. Wonderful example would be the work of Madeline Miller. I'm not a huge fan of her work, or really a fan, period, end of statement. But anyway, you get the idea. So, a competition where gods are fighting against humans on a nearly equal footing, in which the gods can and do lose, can bug me. Especially when, as I have read these 5 volumes, I am actually rooting for the gods. There's just something about Brunhilde that she is up to something. She's absolutely up to something. And I don't particularly find the human champions to be all that rootable. Whereas I actually find the gods more rootable than the humans. Anyway, so in the end, I really do enjoy. I mean, I like the series. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It reads very fast, and the artwork is amazing. That was largely one of the things about me really leaning into wanting to read the series, is the fact that the artwork is just gorgeous. So let me show you some art and talk a bit about some of the fights. So the first fight is between Thor and Lubu, and it is really fascinating. I mean, it's basically they each have set moves and sort of exchange moves. So how the fights work is that there's a bit of a plot progression before the fight, introducing the fighters, and then there's the fight, which has a setup, and then sort of first moves, and then sort of the fight kind of ebbs and flows until the winner is finally wins. And during the fight, there's a bit of commentary from deific supporters of the god, supporters of the human champion, and some snarky back and forth between Brunhilde and some of the gods. So and also during the fight there will be some history of both the god and the mortal in question. Oh yeah. So I had fun. That. It's just, I mean, the artwork is really wonderful. So I'm definitely going to pick up more volumes of Record of Ragnarok. Oh. And there's the Bishonen Adam. So, yeah. So that was Record of Ragnarok. So on Monday and Tuesday, I read the first four volumes of Great Priest Imhotep by Makoto Morishita. So is set in contemporary Japan. It's about a young woman named Hinome whose father is obsessed with the occult, and she herself has been cursed. When she opens her mouth to speak, she breathes fire. I mean, she also has a scar on her neck. This curse is caused by a magi, a demonic entity that has assumed the persona of the Egyptian pantheon. So these are false gods or false imitations of the Egyptian gods. Has been sent to defeat the Magi, to seal them, to destroy them. He has been sealed for 3,000 years for a crime that is revealed in the second volume. So arrives in Tokyo. He meets Hinome and goes to her house, where he basically sets up shop, because when her father learns that Imhotep is in the house, then he just basically goes, "Welcome," and treats him as one of the family. And gradually, the two, and Hinome, become friendly with each other. So cures or exorcises the Magi, which is a Sekhmet, and seals her. And then they basically go on adventures looking for Magi alongside a little Chibi Anubis. And eventually, sort of the plot begins to spread out from there. So this first volume is largely kind of like setting the scene, setting up the story. The rest of the series, or the volumes that I read, introduce sort of a wider conflict. So 3,000 years ago, Imhotep was a prodigy priest who became friends with a young prince named Djoser, who aspired to, once he became pharaoh, to change Egypt. Unfortunately for Djoser, he was actually selected for sacrifice. In the setting, basically evil energy accumulates, and every so often a individual possessing the sun, a power called the Sun Soul, must be sacrificed in order to banish the miasma. And Djoser is the next up for sacrifice. Imhotep, wanting to protect his friend, tries to find a way to avoid it. And it goes terribly wrong, and this causes Djoser to become corrupted and for the Magi to be born. So basically, Imhotep trying to clean up his mess. thousands of years later. But Joser returns and has his own agenda. So the first sort of arc after we learn all this is that Joser himself is also active in the modern day, and that and some members of the Priests of Amen have to team up to fight Joser and his minions. And it was really fun. I quite enjoyed these volumes. They were quite a hoot. And also really liked the artwork. Let me show you some. Yeah, that was fun. And then my original plan for Wednesday and Thursday was to read the 4 volumes of Kaiju number 8 by Naoya Matsumoto that I have. And so Kaiju number 8 is a series in which monsters called Kaiju routinely attack Japan. In order to fight against these Kaiju, a special force within the Japanese Self-Defense Force is dedicated to destroying these monsters. Kafka, the main protagonist, when he was younger, aspired to join this force. However, things didn't work out, and he joined the sort of a cleanup company that they basically clean up after these fights and remove the kaijus and stuff. One day, during a cleanup, he and a new employee are attacked by a kind of a remnant kaiju, and they're both injured. In the hospital, an insect-like kaiju basically invades Kafka's body and turns him into a human kaiju hybrid, Kaiju number 8. Kafka uses this in order to, as motivation and as a means to reapply to this special force, and he gets in and basically helps the Japanese Self-Defense Force, this force, to battle kaiju using his hybrid abilities. I collected these 4 volumes about 2 years ago, and had a mixed reaction. I remember rather liking the first volume, but my enjoyment of the second and third volume wasn't great, and I, at the time, decided to pass on the series. But I wanted to give it another look. And as I started to read this first volume, I decided against it. So I decided to put it aside. And I might come back to it, or I might not. I don't know. The artwork is pretty cool. But I'm just not a huge fan of Kafka. I think initially I liked the idea of the main character in a shonen story being older, like being rather different from your standard shonen protagonist. The problem is that while Kafka is decidedly older, I mean, he's in his early 30s, so he's about 15 years older than your standard shonen protagonist. His maturity isn't all that different. So I don't know. I mean, I might give this another go at some point or not. I don't know. We shall see. So on Thursday, I decided to read the first 3 volumes of Yu Yu Hakusho by Yoshihiro Togashi. This is one of the great manga series. It came out in the early 90s. It's about a young man named Yusuke Urameshi, who is a juvenile delinquent. One day he sacrifices his life to save a young boy about to be run over by a car. This event was unforeseen in the underworld, and Yusuke is given a chance to return to life if he successfully passes a trial. When Yusuke returns to life, he is appointed spirit detective. He basically is responsible for investigating crimes in the mortal world or living world that are committed by demons and spirits. So the first 2 volumes are largely dedicated to Yusuke as a ghost, to sort of trying to come back to life. A lot of the chapters are standalone. And so in this first volume, Yusuke helps a young boy come to terms with the death of his dog, with helping an old man accept death, and helping a young tanuki help this old man. Also helping a young woman get over being stood up. And it's really fun. Like, I absolutely had a blast. I loved every moment with this. It was so much fun. The 3rd volume starts Yusuke on his career as a spirit detective, and that's largely what happens for the rest of the series, which I'm really looking forward to picking up the rest of the series. I need to really get on that. So the first part of Yusuke's career is he has to fight 3 demon thieves who have stolen 3 treasures from the king of the underworld. He rather easily dispatches the first demon, Goki. The second demon, Kurama, has basically an altruistic reason for stealing what he stole, and peacefully surrenders after it's accomplished, and also forms a close bond with Yusuke during that. And the third is Hiei, who wishes to create a demon army and is the toughest opponent of the 3. And then the second batch of chapters is the start of probably what's going to be a long arc. So yeah, I had a blast. This was just so much fun to read. I'm definitely looking forward to more of YuYu Hakusho. Oh. So yeah, that was fun. So my plan for the first chunk of March is to read a mammoth. So like I mentioned in my March TBR, I'm planning on bookending my March reading with two mammoths, starting with The New Roman Empire by Anthony Kaldellis. This is a massive history of the Byzantine Empire that I've had for a few months now. I'm looking forward to reading this, although there is some trepidation. Hopefully my good mood will see me through, because I'm quite happy right now. I got a book haul in today, and it was very pleasing. But I read Kaldellis' earlier work, Streams of Gold, Rivers of Blood, and didn't get on with it. And again, I'm starting to feel my interest in history ebbing. So I don't know if that's just I've been unfortunate in my selection of books the last few months, or if this is a sign of another taste change, which guess I got so used to having that 20-year-long science fiction and fantasy that I forgot that my other interests tend to be a lot shorter. I don't know. But hopefully I love this book. Hopefully I do. And I'll adjust if as needed. But anyway, BookTube, this video is going on a little longer than I anticipated, which is usually what happens when I read a lot of manga and talk about it, because I do have a lot of fun talking about manga and reading manga. So anyway, BookTube, I'm going to go and sign off for now. I'll see you next week, because I'm hoping I will be able to make a lot of videos. Hopefully at least one a day, but we shall see. So anyway, BookTube, until next week, thank you. Have a great rest of your afternoon and evening and weekend. And until I see you again, stay safe.